Before music fans ever listen to your music, they're going to see some sort of visual representation of it in your artwork. Getting the artwork right can not only make you look more pro, but it can keep your release from getting delayed. So, on today's episode, we're going to be discussing all things artwork. So, let's get to it.
You're listening
to the CD Baby
CD Baby
DIY
Musician Podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to episode number 287 of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast, where on today's episode, we're going to be discussing the new rules for cover art. Yes, cover art. Very important part of the release. My name is Kevin Bruner, and joining me is Chris Robley. Chris, how are you doing?
Doing great. I am prepping a new single for release, which means I need some cover art. So, timely discussion.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, it's one of those things that in the digital world, we need it more and more and more. Everything needs cover art, whether it's a single, an EP, an album. It doesn't matter. If you're releasing a track, it must have art to accommodate it. And I think oftentimes artists don't think about this.
It's definitely an afterthought. I mean, even with me, how many times have we put out music? It's still the last thing I think of. Oh, I need a cover.
Hey,
Every
believe it or
time
not,
surprises me.
Believe it or not, the last single we did, this last Christmas single we did, I had the art done before we had the mix done. I'm like, I'm determined to not be scrambling for art last minute.
You're really learning from your mistakes, Kevin.
I'm still learning, Chris. That's why we're here. That we're here to learn together and go on this journey of music together. So I think it's going to be a good discussion. It's going to be an important one because as we have seen here at CD Baby, running a distribution company for many, many, many years, as Chris already mentioned, it's sort of an afterthought at times, but it's incredibly important. And we'll get into that in a bit. But first, just want to highlight that, as you're marketing your music or you're releasing music and you want to market it and use tools to reach more people, we have those for you at CD Baby. And you don't even have to have distributed yet to get access to them. So just head on over to cdbaby.com and create an account. If you already have an account, these free marketing tools are right there on the dashboard for you. Just click the link. I think the link says free marketing tools, and it'll take you to our sister company, show.co. You can do pre-saves. You can do social unlocks, which allow you to drive followers in exchange for maybe some exclusive content. There's lots of great things you can do. You can run ads and all that, but you get free access from CD Baby, from your CD Baby dashboard. So head over to cdbaby.com, create an account, get those free marketing tools. I think it is the best pre-save tool on the market. I stand by that.
I concur. And just to give proof to that, it's because a pre-save on its own doesn't do much for anyone. But with our pre-save tool, it makes it very easy for you to offer an incentive that is worth your fan taking the action and pre-saving the song so they can get something else. So
exactly,
this streamlines that whole process for you.
Exactly. All right. Chris, I've got a hot take here for you. That'll set us up.
Okay.
You ready for a hot take?
I'm ready.
Here's the hot take. The hot take is, contrary to what your mom may have told you, you can judge a book by its cover, and people do. If your artwork sucks, no one will want to listen to your music.
I think I can raise the temperature on that hot take.
Oh, please raise the temperature on that hot take.
If your artwork sucks, so does your music.
Whoa.
What do you think?
Whoa. Let's calm down there.
I'm sticking by that one. That's my hot take.
Well, you're going to have to listen to this episode of the podcast to understand that hot take and where we're coming from. And so we're going to dive in. We've got what will probably be the first of a couple series about artwork. It's that there's that much to talk about. It's crazy when you think about it, how much there is to getting the artwork right, from the file type to what can be on it and all that kind of stuff, and how you can easily make it. So we're going to tackle today a lot of the stuff, the do's and don'ts of artwork.
Yeah, and I was just going to add to the fact that this is going to be a series. We've got Dan Cole, someone on our design team, going to help us out in a future episode, sort of about the the different elements of design, typography, photography, whatever, balancing different elements. So that'll be more of like the nuts and bolts of aesthetics. And then Christina's going to join us to talk about what's that one? Sort of, how to set the vibe and the concept behind your art, make sure it's on brand with your music, stuff like that. But yeah, this one's very nuts and bolts, do's and don'ts.
Yes. Nuts and bolts, do's and don'ts, the things that oftentimes get people stuck in the distribution process, or their music doesn't go live, or they get an email from their distributor saying, hey, you are violating guidelines. And so we're going to dive into some of those. And honestly, this first little segment we have is just about the file type, because that is incredibly important. And it is important that it meets these specifications or it will not be accepted. So we can dive right into those. These aren't the ones, these aren't things you're going to whip out at a party, but they're very important.
I mean, you could. It'd be a really boring party, but
hey, if you want to know the line on album art, I've got it for you. So, they need to be 3000 by 3000 pixel maximum and 1400 by 1400 pixel minimum. So very important.
And for anyone who needs this spelled out, those are squares.
Squares.
Perfect squares.
Yes, perfect squares. And by perfect square, we mean perfect. 1401 by 1400 is not a perfect square. That is not. So you will need to make sure that is a perfect square. It needs to be a PNG, a GIF, a JPEG, or a JPEG file type. I've not used a GIF. I would probably tell people to stay away from that one.
Yeah. I mean,
that's on the list.
Wow. It says it's on. Yeah. I'm going to just try it now to see what happens.
It doesn't mean it can be animated.
Good
GIF
point.
is just
That's
a file type.
Distinction.
Yeah. Stick with a PNG or a JPEG. It needs to be 72 to 300 DPI, which to me, this one's a little bit of a misleading one, because if you have the correct pixel resolution, that's what you need to worry about, because sometimes when you make adjustments for DPI, you're really just adjusting for the screen. You're not adjusting for actually a file type, but it does. 300 DPI is print quality. So 300 DPI is really what you want. This one, Chris, actually, people can run into some issues at times. It needs to be less than 25 megabytes. And I've actually had this problem. Someone gives me this beautiful file and it's like 50 megabytes.
Yep. That happened. I had a friend of ours design something. They sent it over in this PDF that was just massive. Couldn't deal with that one.
Yes. Massive. And so you may need to adjust the quality some. These are the kind of things, this little list here is just give it to your designer, whoever's making it, or if you're using software, it should all be there in the stuff to, when you're formatting the file. And so that's just what you need to know. Is there one more? Do we have one more on the list?
Oh, did you mention the color things? I don't know what those mean. RGB, CMYK. What means nothing to me.
Well, RGB is red, green, blue, compared to CMYK is like cyan, magenta, Y, and K. I think Y is yellow. I don't know what K stands for. But CMYK is usually what people use for printed materials oftentimes. So RGB is usually what people use for, things that they're doing on screen. But RGB. So if you're using a design service or designer, just make sure you give them all these stats or these specifications, because they'll know what it means. And I think that's it.
Yeah.
Well, as far as the boring, like, here's the file types.
Have fun. Well, now that we've warned everyone that your image should be perfectly square, let's be honest, we've all made things that are just slightly off. And if that's the case, there's a couple easy solutions. One is Pixlr, Pixlr.com, or Canva. You can create a free Canva account, go in there, just do a tiny bit of cropping. You'll be all set.
Yeah, and those websites should default to RGB on the color scheme, but they also let you adjust the file size. So those are great tools for you in order to make sure your album art is in, meets the guidelines, especially if you aren't somebody who has Photoshop or any other photo editing tool and familiar with that.
I was just going to say, with a lot of those things, if it doesn't meet those specifications, when you try to upload it in CD Baby for distribution, you'll get an error. It won't work. So you'll know fairly quickly.
Yes.
But
and
we do have a list of things you won't know right away.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that later. But
yeah. So that, getting the file right is just part of the battle. and you know what, honestly, I think part of it is, we already said artists typically save this for the last minute. I've even had artists multiple times recently ask me, you mean I have to have art even for a single? I'm like, what music platform are you using? I've never been on Spotify and seen tracks with no artwork. I've never been on Apple Music or Amazon Music. Sure, if you're on SoundCloud, you don't have to have art with it. But yeah, so what platform are you using? Yes, you have to have art with everything, singles. But we titled this episode "The New Rules for Cover Art" because as we were putting this together, I actually learned a few things. Things have changed, and it's a very different world from when we were a CD-based world, and you could put whatever you wanted on your album art because it didn't matter. It was, most likely you were just selling it at the shows, and even if it was in stores, there was a lot of leeway with what could be on artwork. But on these digital platforms, there are specific guidelines. This first one might be obvious, but maybe not. And speaking of the CD world, that the uploaded image must match your physical album cover artwork, meaning you can't have the CD version and the digital release version having different album art.
Yeah. And why would you? Why would you?
Well, I could see reasons where, especially with back catalog, someone is releasing album art and or a new a back catalog, and they want to upgrade the artwork for the physical album. And it really probably comes down to the reality of it is probably more in line with the UPC. They have the same UPC, the art has to match. Right. I'm sure there's some things beyond that where master recordings, the art needs, to some degree. But I believe this one really comes down to the UPC. You can't have the same UPC with two different variations. But this next one on here, Chris, kind of surprised me. I wasn't sure about. This was one of the things where I learned, and that was different releases can have duplicate identical covers as long as there isn't a metadata text mismatch.
This one always confuses me, not the rules of it, but why are artists releasing multiple things with the same album cover or cover art? I mean, I guess maybe if it's all in a series and you're going to package it up as an album, you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel every time. But isn't this fun? Isn't it fun to come up with a unique presentation and vibe for everything you put out? Like, I have never culturally understood that thing of like, I'm going to put out 300 songs and they're all going to have the same damn picture on the front. Like, come on.
Well, that answered my question. You can do it if you want to.
You can do it. Well, we should say this. You can do it as long as there's either no text and it's just the same picture with no text. If it has text, it has to match the title, the metadata for the release. So like the only instance I could see that being a thing is if you put out a single and the title of that release is that song title, and then later you decided to call an album the same thing with the same artist name. So it'd be like Chris Robley, single name, Chris Robley. Album, which is the same as a single name. Cool. Those can have the same, but that's really the only instance I could think of where you'd have text on it that could be identical.
Yeah. So a common use case, like say your lead off single is the same name as the album. You can use, and you release the single first, you can use the same album art. But I think this also comes into play because this answered one of my questions. You see a lot of uh, big artists, especially artists that had a career going before the digital age, and them re-releasing old albums like digitally remastered, and it has the same art, but it's a different list. It's not the same. They didn't pull the old one down and re-release something in its place. Both versions exist, and they have the same album art. They're the same album. That's something where we see it happen. uh, the other thing is, if you had like, yeah, a bunch of singles that you kind of wanted to feel like a collection.
Yeah, the other example I was thinking of, maybe you just have the artist name and you never have the name of the single or album on it, then you could just repurpose that as much as you want. I could see there being a benefit to that in terms of speed of release. Like, you don't have to like spend hours considering your cover art every time, but just spend the time. It's fun.
It is fun. It is fun. And you know what? Actually, what I've done on a side note, uh, I use a design service called Design Pickle, but I use them for a lot of idea generation as well. Sometimes it ends up being the album art. Oftentimes it just gets all the ideas out there. Then I get a designer I work one-on-one with to get in the album art, the final art, especially for albums. But what is great is when you do a lot of like trying to figure out what the album art should be, it becomes a piece of content that you can release for your fans to like on here were all the alternate ideas or the concept art leading up to the final art. And it just becomes kind of a fun behind the scenes uh, piece of content that you can put on socials, and people can kind of follow along with the creation process.
Yeah. Speaking of following along, I'm realizing I think I'm looking at notes that are out of order because the two things we've said so far, I don't know where they are in your notes.
Really? I'm just going right down the list.
Guide me.
You know what?
There we go. I see it now. I'm all caught up.
You're all caught up. You good?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm
all
oriented here.
All right. So the part we're at, Chris, is different releases now. Oh no, we just had that. We just said that. We're at the important, the big bolded important.
This one's huge.
Why don't you read it?
The text that's on your cover artwork must match the metadata. So the metadata is the information you're plugging in when you sign the music up for distribution. So if you are Bruce Springsteen releasing a solo album, it needs to say Bruce Springsteen in the metadata and the cover artwork. It can't say Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. That's a whole different thing. So your album title should match, your artist name should match exactly. And if you get into things like, we have an example. There's a folk singer named John Craigie. He sometimes plays with a band, but if he's releasing it under his own name, it should not say the John Craigie Band. So there's a whole bunch of things like that. You got to be consistent.
Yes. So, first off, you don't have to put your artist name on the album art at all, or the album title. You don't have to do that. But if you do, this is critical that it matches exactly. This is probably one of the top things that artwork gets flagged for. Someone gets creative in the art, but then that's not really their band name. They're like, oh, but we're really this, or vice versa, or they just haven't figured it out yet. They have to match exactly. And do we need to define the word exactly for people?
Well, we probably should. Like, so we don't need to go too far in the weeds, but like, if you list someone as a featured artist on the cover artwork, or, you say with or featuring, those people should be featured artists in the metadata. They shouldn't be primary artists. You got to just think about how you're crediting people in the metadata as an exact reflection of what's on the cover art and vice versa.
Yeah, which would lead me to be like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna release white boxes for my art from
But
now
you can't
on.
do that
This is
either.
too hard. Screw you all. I just want to release white boxes from now on. And I can't.
Nope.
Why are you trying to hold me down, Chris?
And not because
Explain.
they would all be identical, but because you can't do white boxes, black boxes, or a picture of a CD. Like, that's been done a bunch, but you know, your artwork should be saying something. It shouldn't be saying nothing.
Yes. Yes. You just want to hold back my creativity. It was.
You really.
That's how you experience the making of the music. It felt like I was in a white box when I.
You're betting it all on minimalism, but no,
That's right.
You can have a white box with text on it.
True. Yes.
Or, you know, some little element, but no blanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing blank. And, you know, we should also say there always will be some exceptions where it starts like this. But Taylor Swift did this, or U2 did that. Like, you were not Taylor Swift. And you were not U2. If Taylor Swift or U2 are listening to this podcast, I apologize, because in that case you are Taylor Swift or U2. But everyone else, we don't have that kind of leverage to release, because U2 released that one album where it looked just like the test pressing of vinyl. And that could fall if somebody did that. It might be questionable. Depends on how it's represented. If it's just a blank CD, which people started trying to do when we really moved into the digital age and CDs started to become a secondary thing, that artists were just taking pictures of the master CD that the engineer gave them, hands scrawled with the artist name and album title, or what they thought the album title might be. So that's not acceptable. And you might find instances of that out there, but that doesn't mean it is allowed moving forward, or you should do it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of what's allowed and not acceptable, should we go to our do not list?
Yeah. So, Chris, we've got this amazing list of all the things that you should not do with your artwork. And let's get to it, because somebody, or a lot of us listening, have tried to do some of these things. All right, let's run down that list. You got the first.
What you cannot do in your cover art. You cannot have your website URL. No way. No social network names or icons or symbols or anything like that. That's going to get super outdated quick. No contact information. So don't put your phone number or your email address. No porn. No pornographic images.
No porn, people. No porn on your album art.
It's a pretty good rule. No pricing information. That stuff can change. It has no place on your album. Copyrighted images. Don't steal stuff. That is not allowed. No scan of a CD. And lastly, lastly for me, no UPC barcodes. That's supposed to be on the back of your physically manufactured CD, not on the front cover.
Not the front. All right, continuing with that list. The cover art refers to a physical or digital version of the album. You cannot do that. Like, this is a digital exclusive or anything like that. Nope. The cover image is blurry. Cannot be pixelated, blurry. And yes, there is some artistic blurriness, but we're talking about just poor quality. The cover art promises content that the album doesn't contain, includes DVD. There's no DVD on Spotify. You can't do that. The cover art upsells another product, like check out our t-shirts or go check out this album. Can't do that. The cover art claims to be an exclusive of one of our digital partners. You cannot say Spotify exclusive or anything like that. Don't do it. A graphic depiction of violence or gore. Just stay away from this. There's probably exceptions to this. In fact, I know there's some. What gets determined as graphic and gore, I'm sure, is a bit subjective, but just don't do it. The word new or any time-sensitive reference cannot be on your album art, like coming this fall or blah. Don't do it. can't be there. That's the list.
You're
Now you know.
guaranteed to arrive at a day or a year or a decade from now where your music is certainly not new. So don't say it's new on the front cover.
Well, you know what's funny? This was just in 2019. I was playing a show. It was December 2019, and we had just been talking about this. I can't remember why. And I was just finished with sound check, and I was thinking, going back to our merch table, and you're thinking about the artwork issue and going, man, who on earth is doing these things? And I go over to the opening band's merch table, and there sitting on the merch table is a CD breaking most of these rules.
Wow, that's impressive. They might have gone to our help center and seen everything they shouldn't do and then just smashed it all into one album.
Outside, they had the website URL, the social network symbols. They had what did they have? They had the UPC barcode. They had contact information. They had some marketing slogans. I just thought, wow. How, I mean, it doesn't even look like good artwork at that point. So I don't understand the thought process of why we're using this space that's always historically been looked at as a creative extension of the music. So why are we trying to turn it into a marketing billboard? Or where did that idea come from? And I get it. That during the CD era, like especially in the 90s, people would put stickers on the CD on the outside of the cellophane wrap saying like exclusive or
press
content
or something,
or includes DVD or a press quote. That was very common. Things that were time sensitive or that you didn't want on the actual album art. And in the digital space, I think artists have tried to put that on the actual art, but don't do it.
So one of the common mistakes that I see happening so often, and I'm shocked that it happens this much, is the weird pixelation and blur that happens when people stretch images. Why are we stretching images? It's 2022. You have Canva. You have what is going on? It's not 2004 anymore. Like back then, sure. But what happens if you take an image that's this big, or rather, like, let's say it's like this, and then you make it go like that? All that information gets it looks like crap, and not cool crap. It doesn't look like degraded in a really hip way. It just looks terrible. So don't do that.
Make sure when you're adjusting an image size, like if it's off, say you're like, oh, it has to be 1400 pixels by 1400 pixels. Say you got an image that's 1350 by 1400. You want to make sure the constrained proportions box is checked. And you want to adjust the 1350 to 1400. So now your image is going to be bigger than 1400 on one side, but then you're going to have to crop the extra off. And then ultimately, for me, when it comes to these guidelines, put your artwork next to, go to like the new release Friday playlist on Spotify. Does your art look anything like what you're seeing there? And I'm not necessarily talking style or mood or vibe, but I'm talking about, do you see them with stretched pixelated images? Do you see them putting marketing slogans on it? Do you see them trying to upsell other things? No, you don't. So therefore, you should not either. This is how it works. And, it's just funny to me how often artists just try to hope nobody notices when it comes, like, I'm just going to do this real quick. I hope no one notices or catches this. It's like, no, it's got to be a nice file, because the other thing that's not really being represented here when we look at artwork and talk about it and think about where it shows up on Spotify or Apple Music, Amazon, is that some people are listening to, especially probably people that have like Apple TV, the TV is displaying the album information and the artwork is big. And so a lot of these things are to accommodate large displays that represent your artwork, and you want it to look good. And these platforms want a consistent user experience. And so that's where some of the large file sizes come in, because you could say, well, on Spotify, it only ever shows at 300 by 300 pixels. Why does it have to be so big? That's because it's on your computer screen, but it's not your TV or all the other places, the screens in cars that are happening these days.
Yeah, and
It
I think
shows.
that's really important to point out why. And I tell people just 3,000 by 3,000. Even though you technically can do 1,400 by 1,400, I don't even mention that. Like, I just recommend get us a 3,000 square image because for the exact reason you're mentioning. Like, you blow it up, you want as much quality there as possible so it still looks good when it's displayed giant.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why we have to do these things, because it's not just ending up on a CD that you're selling at shows, at your merch table, or that you might get in a few record stores around town. It's showing up in all sorts of different usages. So, do we dare venture into these
Rare exceptions.
rare exceptions?
I
Let's
think we
go.
should. We can go through them quick.
Okay, yeah.
Well, we should also do the caveat of if you think you fit into one of these rare exceptions, you should definitely go to CD Baby's Help Center and search for cover artwork because all the real specific details will be there. But
Yeah.
one of them I think is interesting is if I were to put out an album, Chris Robley and Friends, I can do that, but I then need to make sure I list those individual friends on the tracks that they appear on. So it can't just be Chris Robley and Friends, and then like every track just has me as the primary artist without other featured performers.
Yes. Which could happen. That could happen. um, well, and also the other one, I think an artist just emailed me about this recently. There's more additional performing artists listed on the artwork must be credited and added as a primary or featured artist on the album or specific track. So would that be the case, Chris, of like, if it was like a true collaboration, like Chris Robley plus Drake?
Okay, so if it's a like a plus and they're both supposed to be regarded as primary artists,
Yeah.
then that's fine to have Chris Robley plus Drake. I would really love to hear that song, by the way, on the album. Or it could even say Chris Robley X Drake, because I know that's kind of a trendy way of saying and that's fine on the cover artwork. But when it comes to the metadata, you just have to create primary artist fields for both of those. Chris Robley is one, and then you hit the little plus button, add an additional primary artist, and then put Drake there. And I love that Drake is second.
Yeah,
behind me.
of course. I mean, we're
I'll
doing
manage
it
better.
alphabetically. Chris comes before C before D. So,
C before D.
In that instance, because I know people are doing more collaboration, would the artist name for that album or single still be Chris Robley?
Well, no, if they're primary artists.
Okay, so the primary artist, okay.
It should be both.
Okay, so it will show up on platforms like the song name, and then where we normally see the artist, like Chris Robley, or if it's a band like my band, Small Town Poets, it would say Chris Robley, comma Drake.
Yep.
Okay.
And then that release would show up on both artists' profiles and discographies.
Yeah. So that's the advantage of doing that way if you're doing collaborations, because it shows up on both discographies. Let's see. We've got this one's I think important. Version info, because we tell artists all the time, hey, you release your album, but then it's time to go back and release some support material, and that could be live versions, acoustic versions, remixes, and all that kind of stuff. So you can use the same artwork, but the one change has to be if it's remix, that remix has to be on the art and remix has to be on the title of the album, or remixes, or if it's like our last album was called Northwest by Southeast, so if we did Northwest by Southeast remixes, that's what it would have to say. We could use the same art.
I mean, it's worth reminding everyone that you don't have to have any text. So if you want to kind of avoid like, oh, am I getting this confused? Just do an image with no text at all, and then you'll be fine, as long as it doesn't have porn, as we established earlier. It isn't stretched.
And that seems like an obvious statement with the porn.
Just,
I,
I think
you
I
know,
should reiterate.
as many releases as we've handled, I'm sure someone has tried it.
Oh yeah.
But I'm it's not like 10% of all album releases try to pass off porn as their album cover or something
No,
like
but I
that.
vividly remember some from about 10 years ago that made
Yeah.
attempts. Another thing about if there's a like let's say the front cover of your cover artwork has text in Greek and use Greek letters, Greek characters, the metadata has to match that as well. So whatever language you're including the text on the cover, it's got to match the metadata.
Yeah, and this happens a lot with artists that have audiences and multiple that speak multiple languages, um, and where you might have a blending of languages. It just needs to be consistent. It does come up. The music business is getting far more global, and especially now, a lot of collaborations happening cross cultural collaborations. So it's like you just need to know that the artwork and the metadata have to match the language that they're in. And we also ask you what language the lyrics are sung in, but that doesn't impact the art. Let's see. All right. We have some rare exceptions, but actually, some of these actually could come up more, not all that rare. And if you're already like, my brain is full, this is enough information, you might want to stop here and then just reference the help center later, because I don't want to confuse anybody, but there are some exceptions that could be help on the artistic front, or maybe in how you tend to represent yourself as an artist. Should we dive into these?
The first one is that you can, I don't know why you would, but you can list the names of band members on the cover art along with the band name. So the cover artwork technically could say The Beatles, George Harrison, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, and then the album title Revolver or something like that. I don't know why you want to list everyone in your band, like just be a band and put the band name, but you could, as long as it doesn't say featuring George Harrison or with George Harrison, because then again, that stuff has to be reflected in the metadata.
Yeah. I actually just had an artist ask me this question about putting all the individual band members on the album art.
I can see in jazz or, genres like that where it's like it's really dependent on the reputation of the player, and you'd be really excited about the whatever, the Brooklyn ensemble if you know the players in it. But in like a rock band or indie or like even a hip hop crew, like at some point it's just like just be the thing. Just be that entity.
I mean, if we're already in our first release putting our individual names on there, I think the band needs some therapy. Is it? We're like a 1 foot in and 1 foot out. All right.
Just hedging my bets here.
Yeah. Go ahead and put my name on the cover just so they know that I was here for a while. So, the front cover art can have abbreviations and acronyms for artist names and album titles. I almost didn't want to include this one because I know this could probably drive some confusion. But
and that rule does not apply if you use your own legal name. Like I make music under Chris Robley. I can't say that it's a Chris Robley release and then put C Robley or C. Robley on the cover. But you can if it's Insane Clown Posse, right?
Yes. Yes. For example, if the artist's name on the cover art is ICP, then it's okay for the metadata to list the artist as Insane Clown Posse, or vice versa. This one surprised me. I did not know this. I've seen those exceptions happen, but it's always been, it's rare because we are talking about rare exceptions, but it's always been a major label artist. And I think the times I've seen it has always been legacy catalog as well, stuff that was in motion before the current digital state of affairs. And so I wasn't sure. I didn't know this. Let's see. And like you said, you cannot be like, if I was going under Kevin Bruner, I can't go K Bruner. Can't do that. Has to be your legal name. But Small Town Poets, we could be SP, because that's, I don't know why we would, but anyway.
I know this is incorrect, but every time I abbreviate your band name, I could do STP, and then I think
So
of
wrong.
Stone Temple Pilots.
So wrong. It's 2 words. Small town we have as well. And especially we made sure to do it that way and brand it that way because when we were emerging, Stone Temple Pilots was big, which is an example of a band where they branded themselves as STP in many places on their merch. People referred to them as STP. So you could see a situation where they released something and it was just STP on the cover, and that would be fine.
Yeah. I think the last thing we sort of already touched on, it's about including the names of people that are on the album. They could be band members or they could be sort of like session players. It's okay to include those names as long as it's not preceded by featuring or with. And if it's a producer or mixed by, you do want to credit that. So it'd be like produced by Brian Eno or something like that.
Yeah. And some of these things, it's important to point out, probably doesn't impact many listening, is that some of these rare exceptions do not work if it's in the classical space. In the classical space, there's some extra rules.
Extra. It's like a whole different universe.
Well, they always had their special little glassed-in room at the record store. Like, ooh, we're classical. We can't associate with the riffraff out there.
They just poured it over their little,
yeah. So
that's not really fair of me to say.
No, it's not.
It's a very complicated genre to track composers, performers, rights holders, blah blah blah, conductors, all the different things, featured instrumentalists. There's a lot to juggle.
I've never understood why the conductor gets so much credit.
He just waves his hand, or they just wave their hands around. And
I know. It's like, I mean, you didn't play anything. You turned the pages.
There's your hot take. That's the real hot take. What conductors don't do anything.
I took a conducting class in college, and I'm like, I don't feel like I did anything.
All I remember is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2.
Yeah, you go 1. Yep, and you just scowl at people to make sure they come in right. Mm-hmm. But at the orchestra, aren't those people pro enough that they know where to come in?
They know how to read their rest, their 64-bar rests.
Couldn't they all just have in-ears with a click track and and cues there?
Come on, classical, you're using auto-tune. Why don't you use click tracks?
They are. Oh, I'm so disappointed.
I mean, sometimes.
All right. We said the cover art must be the same language as the metadata. So yeah, I think we've covered it. We've covered it and probably offended some people in classical music at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we just got through the do's and don'ts, which is not all that exciting a topic. So the other 2 episodes we have in the works are going to be a lot more creative, expressive. That'll be a lot of fun to dig into, sort of how to even conceptualize your artwork and then how to execute that concept.
Yeah, because I think, what we covered was like, here are all the rules, but we still didn't talk about strategy. We didn't talk about the creative representation of the music. To me, a lot the album art really sets the tone for the marketing materials and a lot of the assets you create during the promotion cycle of that release, and maybe influences videos and all sorts of stuff. So I feel like the album art has become this critical piece that really sets the tone in many ways. What we just went through is like, don't do these things to keep yourself hung up from getting distributed, because until you fix these issues, we can't release this music. But that didn't even cover, like, how do I get good creative work done? What are some ideas, or how should I prepare to make the creative process of artwork be more successful? We will be covering that in future episodes. And while we're talking about future episodes, we're going to start breaking up listener feedback into separate episodes and ideally give more time for that. And so if you've got a question, whether it's about artwork or if you just want us to weigh in on something, or you want to weigh on something yourself, you've got a comment, you have a success story, you can be on the show. All you have to do.
We're also doing this on YouTube, so I can type up the number for people to see on screen when you read it.
Yes. You're going to do that right now?
I'll do it right now.
You can do that right now.
In real time.
Yes. So the number is 360-524-2209. Or you can email us at podcast@cdbabypodcast.com. And if you call the listener line, you got to keep your message shorter than 3 minutes. Brief and to the point is best. So, if you need to prepare yourself, write out a little thing that you want to say, that's fine. We love getting calls. We love getting emails. We love including them on the show. And when we get a lot of them, it's great for us to be able to just do a listener feedback show that gives us more time to prepare for them, make sure we fully answer it. And we just like to have fun with them.
And we say that phone number one more time because you went too fast for me.
360-524-2209.
There we go. And then there it is.
Wow.
Email right too.
We have, man. Look what we've become, Chris. All right. Any other final thoughts, Chris, on artwork? Any more hot takes? Any more group?
We shouldn't do any more hot takes for this.
No, it gets too hot.
Yeah. Actually, I do have something I was going to say. Should we tell people what our plans are for the podcast that might be slightly different from usual?
Sure. Go ahead.
I'll just summarize. We're going to be recording weekly episodes, which is exciting for us because it's been, hit or miss. This has always been not on the back burner necessarily, but we haven't been the most consistent. So we're going to be putting out episodes every week. They'll probably be a little bit shorter since we'll be doing weekly episodes. So, we'll pack more in.
Yeah. So if there's a topic you want us to cover, email us, call us. We'd love to know what's on your mind, things that you're curious about. We're trying to think in terms of here's things related to distribution. Here's things related to what the artist community may be talking about and wondering about, whether it's NFTs or is social media dead or whatever, discussion-driven ideas. And then there's other things about strategy and marketing your music. We're trying to, make the rounds. And we're going to be doing it weekly.
Yeah.
So be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on a podcast app or Spotify, be sure to hit subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it because they're going to be coming fast and furious.
Yeah. Nice reviews in the Apple Podcast app. Those always are quite helpful.
Yeah. So I think that brings us to the end, Chris.
All right.
Well,
I'll see you in a week.
Yep. So we'll catch you all later. Take it easy. Bye.